Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly. Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast, your podcast to help you cruise a little smarter. I'd like to welcome back to the show. She just got off another ship. She's always on a ship. How are you doing today, Christy?
I'm well.
All right, well, we won't talk about this too much, but what ship were you on? The Celebrity what?
We were on the Beyond.
Beyond.
The newest in their Edge class fleet and their newest Celebrity ship.
Was it beyond your expectations?
Kind of was. Nice.
I love the words that they come up with cruise ships. You never get
Celebrity 1, Celebrity 2 would sound kind of boring, right?
Well, that's true. But you never get like the rusty bucket or not going to get there or...
maybe that's what they should start like grandfathering the ships out in, right? Or sunsetting them like right before. And actually somebody was just on that Margaritaville ship again. And I feel like the rusty bucket might have been the way that she would have described it. She was like, the service was fantastic, but they're not quite there yet.
They need to upgrade the ship, it sounds like still. Yeah. So, all right, well, we are going to turn our focus into some port adventures, and I'm excited to talk about this one because you and I are actually going on a Western Caribbean here soon.
Yeah, I realized how quick that cruise was coming up and questioned all of my life's choices at that point. But I am so excited to cruise with you and your family again, and I'm really excited to do another maritime cruise on the Fantasy, so this will be fantastic.
And I think I'm just going to rename you. Christy is always on a ship or something like that, That's fine.
I accept that.
You accept that. All right, let's bring our guest. It is true. Let's bring our guest in today. He's been on our show several times, and I'd like to welcome back all the way in Utah. How you doing today, Bryan?
Doing well. Just wish I was on a ship as much as Christy.
I think we all do. Well, we are going to talk about your family's, I guess this is the Grand Slam, huh?
Yeah. Grand Slam on the 4 original ships, at least. Haven't been on the Wish, but yeah.
And which ship did you sail on? And I guess we already gave it away that you guys went to the Western Caribbean, but what was the final ship that you needed to sail on to complete that Grand Slam?
So we did them in the order they were built. We did the Magic, Wonder, Dream, and then the Fantasy was our last.
I kind of like that. I don't know if we've ever talked to anybody else who's done that. So I guess before we get into that, who all went on this cruise this time, Bryan?
Yeah, so this is my typical sailing group, which is my immediate family. So it was me, my wife, and our 4 kids. We've got a now 15-year-old daughter, a 12-year-old son, 10-year-old daughter, and 7-year-old son.
And this was a Halloween on the High Seas, I believe?
This was a Halloween on the High Seas, 7 nights on the Fantasy Western Caribbean out of Port Canaveral.
And had you done a Halloween on the High Seas before? I forget.
We did the one on the Wonder last year, but that was like the very first cruise back of the Wonder with all the COVID restrictions. So it was a little bit different than this Halloween on the High Seas. Definitely more Halloween activities this go around.
Well, cool. We'll touch on that just a little bit too. We're going to mainly focus on your 3 ports that you stopped at. And of course, we can always talk about Castaway Cay as well, because we would be remiss if Christy was on and we didn't talk about Castaway, right, Christy?
We aren't allowed to not talk about Castaway, at least a little.
Well, let's just jump into it then. The Fantasy, the 4th ship, the newest of the original 4 ships. What was your overall impressions of the Disney Fantasy, Bryan?
I really liked the Fantasy. I was not such a big fan of the Dream, but I think having been on the Dream first, I felt like Dream was harder to navigate, but I felt like when we got on the Fantasy, I figured out our way around. Some of that, I think, was a little bit of experience. And then also, we moved our cabin to midship, and I felt like being based midship on the Fantasy made it easier. Some of the hard to navigate stuff, I feel like either on the front of the ship or the back of the ship on some of the decks, being based in the middle made it nice. But we really had a lot of fun with Midship Detective Agency this go around. It's one of the things that I really like that they have on the Fantasy. And then we really enjoyed the Broadway shows. Aladdin was phenomenal. I always liked Frozen. And then I've actually come to really like Believe. And I can talk a little bit about what made Believe extra interesting for us on this ship.
Well, let's just jump into it. Yeah. What was it about Believe that you really enjoyed?
So they had a Broadway guest performer presentation one day that I saw on the Navigator schedule. And so we went, and his name was Ian Kennard, or I don't know if I say his last name right, but Ian Kennard or something like that. And he played Jafar in Aladdin and played Dr. Greenway in Believe. And he gave a whole presentation about his career, his childhood, all the way through all the different Broadway stuff that he has done. he explained, I guess Disney brings some Broadway performers on for a shorter contract than the rest of the cast. So they get more experienced Broadway performers who maybe wouldn't be willing to go on the ship for as long, but will come on for a few weeks, take a role. And then part of that is they have to do one of these Broadway guest performer presentations. And it was super fascinating to hear about his career and all the different things he had done. And then watching him, we saw it on our last C day and then Believe was the next night. And so I had that background of having talked to him and heard him for 45 minutes before I watched him in the performance. And I think it made it that much more interesting to watch him and how much he enjoyed playing that character.
That is one of the special things about sailing on a little bit longer sailing, like the 7 days, having some different experiences like that. The 3 days, you kind of pack everything in so they don't have the opportunities to sometimes have performers like that give those type of talks. Anything stand out about his talk about his background as far as growing up and making it to Broadway?
Well, I'll say that my favorite story is he talked a little bit about how sometimes Broadway performers will get into the corporate space. And so he was the star in Walmart the Musical when Walmart went through a big branding change in the early 2000s. And he talked about that. And I thought that would be a really interesting thing. I think Walmart changed their logo and put a star in between Wall and Mart a few years back for a little while. And apparently when that was unveiled, they hired a bunch of Broadway performers and put on a musical and he was the star. So like SMD star. So that was kind of cool. But just hearing his journey, he came from not a family that was into performing, as I recall, but he found that he liked it and just started out as a kid doing some local things and then ended up not thinking it would be a career and turned into a career for him. So it was kind of interesting to hear his journey.
Walmart the Musical. I don't think I've ever seen that. Christy, have you?
Not that I could recall.
I didn't even realize that was a musical. We need Chris on here maybe she would have.
It was an employee-only thing.
Right?
It was like an employee-only event. So he talked about getting into corporate performing. So it was only done for their employees and like their annual employee convention thing.
Gotcha. I love that type of stuff too, because the whole theater industry is something that I think we all enjoy, whether it's movies or live shows. And I know you and your family really enjoy live shows, Bryan, just talking to you over the years. But learning how people navigate that space and end up where they are, it's completely foreign to me. So I would have loved to have been able to listen to his story and then actually watch him perform on stage as well.
Yeah, it was super interesting to hear all the different things that he had done.
I kind of want to go back to, because our first sailing on the Dream was not our favorite. It was probably the least of our sailings, but since I've been back on her again, I've kind of learned to love her. And I don't know if it's because it's like repetition on it or something like that. And knowing the ship a little bit better, like you said, you knew the fantasy a little bit better this time with the layout and everything like that. But I'm super excited to sail on her this summer. So I hope you get an opportunity to go back on the Dream and maybe give her another chance. No shade whatsoever on your thoughts there.
No, for sure. I know that the 3-night sailing, it's hard to compete with a 7-night sailing for sure. But I'm glad we've been on her because I think it made it that much easier to navigate the fantasy. So.
Well, let's talk quick about Halloween on the High Seas. Obviously, sailing on the Wonder right after pandemic, things are completely different there, and they were slowly bringing things back. It was good just to be back on board, I think, for a lot of us. So how did it compare this time? And what was the Halloween on the High Seas experience on the Fantasy this time, Bryan?
The decorations were similar between both sailings, but what I loved is that first night we got the lighting of the pumpkin tree in the atrium. And through just one of those magical moments, my wife happened to get down there and got us a really, really good spot to watch it. So we were on some padded benches around a pillar right in front of the tree. So got to sit down in comfortable seats and watch. And that was kind of a fun little story tell. They have somebody come out and tell kind of a spooky story, and then they go through the lighting ceremony and light up the pumpkin tree. That was fun. That kicked off the cruise. That was that first night. And then they had some Halloween crafts and stuff throughout the cruise, but most of the Halloween activities are just on one day, which ended up being our last sea day. And that was the day we all dressed in costume, and they had a themed anyone can cook, I think is what they call it, cooking class, where they made a spider cake. I didn't get to go. We were at Palo at that time for our Palo brunch reservation, but my oldest took my younger son really wanted to go, so she took him, and they did the cooking class. And then they didn't have it on the menu, but they told everybody in the class, hey, you can order these spider cakes at dinner tonight. And so my kids all did that and got to have that for dinner. It was kind of like a secret dessert menu item. So that was cool. And then they had trick-or-treating. So it was kind of weird to me. They did trick-or-treating up on the top deck. And so you walked around the pool area and through cabanas. They had a handful of stations. It's not anything that I would say super exciting. I mean, you just walk up and there's cast members that say hi and give you candy. Not a huge thrill, but they did it at the same time as the Halloween deck party, which was kind of weird to me. So they had the Halloween deck party going on, and we had gotten a good spot up front. But then my kids saw people walking around trick-or-treating, and then they wanted to abandon the deck party and go trick-or-treating because they didn't want to miss out. And so,
wait, they were literally occurring at the same time?
Yeah.
Or
yeah, literally.
That's weird.
So I think the trick-or-treating may have gone longer, but it was literally going on during the deck party. And so it distracted my kids. I don't know if they were doing that because they were trying to do it twice, once for each of the dinner seatings or something like that. But yeah, so we watched a little bit of the deck party, did the trick-or-treating, and then they had, costumes. Everybody's in costumes. There was something on the Navigator I didn't go about adults. Halloween's and only for adults. I think that was that's how it was labeled, but I think that was the villainous takeover that they did in the adult area that night. But I didn't go to participate in that, but I did see it on the activity on the Navigator.
I feel like a little bit with the Halloween parties, right? Or the Halloween on the high seas right now, they're just trying to figure it out, right? Like for whatever reason, post restart, because I feel like they had some sort of consistency in the past. Maybe it was a crowded, and maybe that was the issue because Steve, your 3-night cruise that had the trick-or-treating, you said it was like mayhem and crazy in there. So maybe they're like, well, let's bring it out on deck so that people have more space. But then they only want to close up the deck when they're already closing the deck. So I don't know. Maybe they're trying to figure out what makes the most sense.
Pro tip I'll give you, though, is if you're on a Halloween sailing and you go up to the deck party, right afterwards, we ended up going and changing and getting on the aqueduct, and there was nobody on the aqueduct, and we rode it like 15 times in a row with nobody, no wait. So that was really fun. One other thing about the Halloween that I should mention is they didn't have it showing up on the website, but we heard that if you called, you could get it. We got the Halloween decoration pack and surprised our kids decorating the room. And it was really nice. Like I wasn't sure, am I going to actually be happy with the quality of this? But it was a really nice Halloween blanket and pillows and magnet and hangers. And we really liked it, took it home and used it for a couple of days before Halloween was over. But we felt like it was a worthwhile expenditure, fun on the cruise and something we'll use in the future.
Yeah, they have those for the Christmas maritime cruises as well. And also they're not showing up online right now. So if somebody is going on one of those cruises, just make a note to call in. You call in like the regular DCL number and they sometimes transfer you. Bryan, did they transfer you?
I was on hold and then had to pass the phone to my wife, and she's the one who actually completed the transaction. Okay. So I don't know if we got transferred or not.
That was when DCL's system, you were booking that when DCL's system was like blowing, it was just having a problem because they revamped it and there were all these errors. And so, yes, it was during the little time of the 3-hour holds.
I would also say, just for anybody, I'm not sure exactly when this is going to come out. This might come out after Christmas, but if you're going on a Pixar Day at Sea or Marvel Day at Sea coming up, if you don't see anything listed, maybe that might be a time to call in because a lot of times they have like room decorations for that, right, Christy?
Yeah. And you can see what the different stuff is, but like those blankets, when they do the blankets and then they have like pillows, they're good quality. They're very nice.
The Christmas ones look super cute. I'm not totally into that type of stuff usually, but I do think the Christmas ones look super cute.
I wish it was thinner because I don't need that thick of a blanket these days in my life, but I understand a whole bunch of people do.
Well, Bryan and I still do. We still live in the place where it gets cold.
Yep.
Well, let's turn to your port adventure. Well, anything else, I guess, about the fantasy that stood out to you, Bryan, that you wanted to talk about?
Chicken schnitzel. Did you have it? Did you love it?
I did not get the chicken schnitzel that night. I can't remember what I got, but some of my family did. And what I got that night, I really liked. We could talk really briefly about the food because I know that there have been people with differing opinions on food on board right now. We really like the food on this cruise, and I thought it was very good. We also especially liked, we got to try some new menus we haven't tried before, so that was fun. One of them, the Captain's Gala menu, and they have lobster on that menu. And I'm not a huge lobster fan. I more often am disappointed with it than I enjoy it. I've had it a couple times that I really liked, but I took a risk and got it and actually quite enjoyed it on that sailing, which kind of surprised me. I didn't expect them to be able to do lobster well, but yeah, we quite enjoyed the food. So I know there's lots of people with different comments going around, and everybody's food's very subjective, but just know for somebody who this was our fourth sailing, we were quite happy with the food on this sailing. I'll also comment briefly on the service because they do have a lot of new cast members. And we found out our first night with our serving team was a little bit rough. And I've heard before your first night can be rough, but I gave a little bit of feedback on a couple of the things that we wanted to see differently. And then we realized our serving team was quite new. Our main server was relatively new with DCL, had been on other cruise lines before. And I think our assistant server, she didn't have a little earning her ears sign, but I think this may have been her first sailing. And one of the things we found is we were friendly and gave them encouragement and, feedback where we needed to. It ended up being one of our favorite serving teams by the end. And so I think just a reminder that, servers are humans too. And especially if they're new and maybe getting used to living on a ship, a little bit of encouragement, friendliness. We went out of our way to say hi to them at other times on the ship, found out when they'd be in cabanas or where they were on castaway. And that seemed to mean a lot to them. And I felt like the level of service and enjoyment really went up as we made a little bit of an effort to encourage and get to know them. And so, if at first your serving team maybe is a little rough, just try to be friendly and give a little encouragement, let them know what you like that they do. And that can make a big difference. And in the end, we really enjoyed them.
That's great feedback. And an experience we even found to be true, Steve, when we did our big group cruise, in the first nights really are tough because there's a lot of changeover. They're trying to get to know all of their guests and even get their likes in the kitchen. And it's a lot for everybody, apparently, which we totally understand. But yeah, if you give a little bit of feedback and a little bit, like you said, encouragement and, show that you're excited about the food and the service and the experience, they can feed off that as well.
Well, let's turn to the port adventures that you guys did. But before we talk about that, Bryan, you guys are a pretty big family, kind of diverse ages and stuff like that. How do you guys as a family decide what you're going to do when you go on these cruises? Do you sit down and kind of talk about it? Like for me, I've been trying to tell my kids, hey, you guys need to take a look at this, and then we'll sit down and talk about it and figure out what we're going to do. How do you do that as a family?
So I'm kind of the researcher of the family. So I will often be looking at the port adventures well in advance. But as we start to get closer, we definitely had a number of family discussions, both between me and my wife and between me and the kids. We talked about what is it that we want to do. We actually, for example, in Cozumel, went through 3 or 4 different excursions, partially because what we really wanted wasn't available originally. And I actually emailed Disney about it, and they actually ended up emailing us about 4 weeks out and told us that they had booked us in it, that it was available, and they moved us to that for us, which was really nice. There's definitely a lot of different discussions. And, if we can't get what we want, what's our backup and those sort of things. It is a little bit trickier with kids. You got to figure out ages. So we've got a wide range, and our youngest is often just below the age of certain activities that we might want to do. So that can be a little bit of a challenge. One thing we also considered on this cruise was, hey, we've got 3 port days in a row. And are we going to want to go? We've listened to your podcast enough to know, hey, you might want to think about that middle day doing something a little less active, which ended up working out well for us.
Those are good points there. Do you use anything beyond Disney as far as resources go, as far as websites or any other ways to kind of learn about what is available in the ports?
I do a lot of Googling about the destination. In this case, what we ended up doing, we'll talk about in Cozumel. I had read a blog. Somebody else had posted kind of a trip report Disney blog, and they had a review. They had done a private boat charter in Cozumel and had these incredible pictures from snorkeling. And I wanted to find something similar. And so that was just that general, reading travel blogs, Googling. I did spend some time on TripAdvisor, learning about some of the destinations to try and get an idea of what are people saying about this if they're not going with Disney. Disney doesn't put reviews right on their port adventure page. And so you kind of have to go find similar, Google similar names, go to TripAdvisor, places like that. Definitely did some of that searching. I tried to go back through the podcast archives a little bit. There wasn't a whole lot. I don't feel like I've talked a lot about port adventures on the Western Caribbean. So hopefully we can share some good things on this episode.
Yes, that's why I wanted to do this episode. I definitely want us to focus on some upcoming episodes about more port excursions for different locations, especially for families, because I feel like this is right. We're trying to entertain people on the podcast, but educate as well. And it's definitely something that even I want to hear more feedback on. So I know for my own clients and for even my own family, but also, just so everybody else can hear it. So we appreciate you coming on to share with us.
So one more question before we touch on what you guys did, Bryan, for you, Christy, as a travel agent. So one of the things that's kind of frustrating about Disney, one, like Bryan said, you don't get any feedback as far as did people like it? Do people not like it? What did they like about it? What didn't they like about it? And sometimes what they do, what they've got on the website, they kind of explains what the port adventure entails is not everything that you want to know. So Bryan emailed Disney. What options do people have with Disney Cruise Line to be able to find out a little bit more about their port adventures, Christy?
The easiest way is to email. The biggest issue I have with Disney is that as a consumer, or frankly, a travel agent, but it doesn't matter. But as a consumer, we can't see what our port adventure options are until it opens up at midnight, unless other people in your group are sharing. Like if you join a Facebook group and they're sharing or they're talking about it. And if you're in one of the first booking categories, you don't know. So you can see, if you go to the website, every single port adventure that they ever offer for that port. But you don't know if they're going to be offering it the week you're going on a cruise. We don't know what is sold out and what isn't sold out, like when it's time to book. So what you're booking at midnight, you guys are luckier actually for once on the West Coast, and you get to book at 9 p.m. or 10 p.m., like a more reasonable time of night. So you're not having a chat with your family at midnight when the booking window opens. So yes, you can email, but they're not going to give you a list of every port excursion that's going on at port. So emailing is probably the best option. And you just email that Disney Cruise general email or whatever, and they get it to the right department. The other time to email is if you have a food allergy and food is being offered, you can specifically ask about that excursion and whether there's going to be an option for you. And I will say that the trickier allergies are, or the more involved they are, the more difficult it is to eat on these excursions. But if it is like just dairy or just gluten, these foreign ports are actually so much better than the United States in dealing with their food and cooking their food. They don't throw in a bunch of different stuff. Like once I went to a restaurant in the States and I had it was a mashed potato and somehow there was gluten in the mashed potato. Like who's putting flour in mashed potatoes? They don't do that in other places for the most part. So you're going to have an easier time eating, but you can email Disney and they will tell you, they'll reach out. It takes forever, but they'll reach out and get an answer and let you know what your options are.
Good points there. If you have a question, email Disney. The other things are with the port adventures, sometimes they show more than what is going to be offered. And sometimes they also show less, especially if you're heading to Europe. A lot of times, if you're looking ahead of time, there may only be 5 or 6 things offered. But as the cruise gets closer, they start adding more adventures. And I think a part of this too has just been the pandemic as far as what's coming back and what's available. And we're kind of coming out of the backside of that, I suppose, now. So, well, let's turn to this cruise, Bryan. You guys run the Disney Fantasy 7-night Western Caribbean out of Port Canaveral with stops at Cozumel, Mexico, Grand Cayman, Jamaica, and then, of course, Castaway Cay. Let's start off with Cozumel. What did you guys have planned there? And let's talk about that first.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to hit a little bit because I didn't actually email Disney. I actually used a form on their website. So we'll talk a little bit about this. So I told you I saw this blog post about people who went to a place called El Cielo in Cozumel and have these incredible pictures of snorkeling and starfish. And I was really interested in it. And I looked through the excursions, and Disney had an option for private. You could charter through them a private sailing, which the blog post that I read sounded like they had just gone outside of their cruise line and chartered something. But we're still a little bit nervous about, wanting to make sure we make it back to the ship. So I was looking into that. And then I noticed Disney added this ultimate snorkeling by yacht excursion, which sounded like exactly what I wanted to do, but it wasn't a full private excursion. When our booking window opened, that was not available. And so I went and looked at the private one.
Hold on, Bryan. Was it not available because it wasn't listed in the options, or was it sold out?
It listed as sold out. I should clarify that. Listed as sold out, but I'm not actually sure that they had it offered or that they had arranged it, because what ended up happening is I went to one of the private charters. And I thought, well, maybe we'll just splurge and do a private charter. The price difference wasn't that big. And so I went into those, and they tell you can't book those in your booking window. You have to fill out a form and request it if you're interested in a private charter. And so I filled out that form and said, hey, I'm really interested in the ultimate snorkeling by yacht. It shows sold out. Can I do a private charter that does something similar? And I did that the day after our booking window. We had booked something else as a backup, and they emailed me back and said, hey, we don't arrange these until 6 weeks out. And, and our booking window is what is it? 90 days out. And so I said, okay, well, we'll just, plan something else and we'll see what happens. And then out of the blue, I got an email. It was about 6 weeks before our sailing saying, hey, we're able to put you on that, not a private excursion, but on that ultimate snorkeling by yacht. We've added you. We left your other excursion on there if you still want it, but you're double booked right now. So, which you can't double book yourself in the app, but they're like, you need to cancel one of them before you sail. And so I was excited because I kind of thought that wasn't going to go anywhere, but then out of the blue, they put us in there. And it made me wonder if this ended up being a very small group excursion. There were just us and one other family on it. So I don't know if they wait till someone expresses interest to actually set it up. And maybe that's what it was, because I noticed not long before we sailed that it showed up as available with availability. So the other family that booked it, maybe once we had a family of 6, they said, okay, you guys are going to pay for it, and then we'll give availability for someone else to book it with you. As it turned out, there was another family of 6 on the cruise, on that excursion with us. And I don't think the boat could have held much more than 12 people, so maybe a couple more. So it was definitely a semi-private, almost exclusive excursion.
Was it everything you wanted it to be?
It was incredible. So let's talk a little bit let's jump into what it was. We met in the Walt Disney Theater, and we saw there were only 6 of the little stickers, or 12 of the little stickers, so we knew it was going to be a small group. As soon as the other family showed up, they took us off the ship and walked us down the pier in Cozumel, and they had a guide that met us there, and the boat pulled right up. This was like a I don't know what you call a motor yacht, bigger than a speedboat, but not a huge ship. And we got right into the boat there. They introduced us to the crew and took us out to go to this incredible adventure. As it turns out, I found out that this really cool area where they have the reefs and the snorkeling in Cozumel is kind of up at the point of the island. So you've got about an hour boat ride to get up to that area. It was kind of nice. They had a front part of the boat that you could go on. The other family was up on the front, kind of the nose of the bow of the boat, I guess. And we were up top where the captain was sailing the boat. They had a seating area up there. So that's what my family took. And it was great just to sail. We don't get to sail. We're in a landlocked state very often other than lakes. And this was a new experience. So it was an hour, but it was fun. Got to practice my Spanish talking to the crew. They all spoke English, but I loved to practice. And so it was really fun to hear their stories about what life had been like with the pandemic. I don't know if fun's the right word, but it was clear that they had a hard go, and they were really excited to have tourists back. And so had a good conversation with them. Also got really cool views of the ship. One of the things I'll say, Disney ships are really beautiful ships. When you have a chance to sail past them and see the other ships in port, you realize just how striking they are. Yeah, did that sailing. And as we got closer, they got us out and said, hey, we want to give you some instruction, get your snorkel gear ready. And so we all went back to the back of the boat to get outfitted and ready and get some instruction. They had a guide with us that was separate from the crew of the ship, who was going to be guiding us through the snorkel adventure. And then one of the crew members ended up jumping in the water and helping as well, which was great to have both of them. This is the one place where we had a glitch with the excursion is, as they were fitting people out, they realized they didn't really have any small kids life jackets that were the right size for my kids. My kids were right on the lower end of the age range allowed on the excursion. And I didn't realize till we got in the water that they put them in a little bit bigger life jacket than they should have. Ended up being okay, but it was not ideal for my kids. The first stop we had was snorkeling along a reef in Cozumel, which was this really incredible experience to be on a reef and see all the fish. But it was a much more intense swim than we planned on. My kids have practiced snorkeling. We've been snorkeling in Cabo. We've been snorkeling at Castaway. We practiced snorkeling in the pool. So my kids are not unfamiliar with snorkeling and not unfamiliar with the water. This is an excursion that if you are not comfortable being in open water and aren't comfortable snorkeling, it's not a good first experience with it. Ended up being about a 45-minute in the water, and we were swimming most of the time along the reef. There's a lot to see there, and our guide wanted us to see as much of the reef as possible, which meant he was kind of trying to keep us moving. It was nice to have the crew member in the back. At one point, I was trying to adjust my son's snorkel. His tube got messed up, and I accidentally dropped it. And the other crew member was able to dive down and grab it for me, which was helpful. But it was really fun, but it was an intense swim, and that was the thing to be aware of. But I've never seen coral and fish like that along a reef, and so that was really cool and what I wanted to experience.
How was the ocean going out there for an hour? Do you think people, if they have motion sickness, would they need to probably bring a patch or something like that?
It's a smaller boat, and there was some motion. it didn't bother me much, but, and I am a little motion sensitive, but not too much. But if you are motion sensitive, I would be prepared that you're going to be on a boat. It was a little, especially as we got to the snorkel area and there were a lot of boats around, you start running into each other's wakes. And that definitely adds to the motion. Also, once we were in the water, there weren't like big waves or swells, but you had a lot of these boats that had come through. And so it was not smooth. It was a little choppy. And so if that's going to bother you, be aware of that as you're actually swimming and snorkeling in the water. It's a popular spot. So there were a number of boats there, and that just churns things up.
And did they offer you like refreshments and stuff on the way back, or once you got back?
Yeah. So that was the first stop. We haven't gotten through the whole adventure yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So after that first stop, and the boat kind of followed along, that was one thing. Partway through, a couple of my kids would have liked to have gone back to the boat, but the boat wasn't quite close enough. It was following along, but that wasn't really an option. So they had to keep going. My youngest ended up just deciding to give up snorkeling and float along. And the guide had like the life ring, and he let people like my youngest just grab on, and he dragged him along. So that ended up working out okay for him. Just gives you an idea of it's a swim for a little while. Once we got back on, they moved to the next spot. Once you get out there, all the spots are pretty close together. So we had like a 5-minute boat ride to the next area. And that area we got back in, it's much shallower there. And that area, they didn't actually make us have life jackets if you didn't want them. We got in, and it's this white sandy bottom with these giant starfish, like ginormous starfish, and they're all over the place. And so you're snorkeling and seeing, instead of coral and fish, you're seeing giant starfish on the bottom of this white sandy beach. It's unique. I've never seen anything like it. This was one of the pictures I had seen, and I wanted to see what this was in real life. And so that was really cool. We only spent about 10, 15 minutes there, but it was a very unique experience and something definitely worth seeing. And then after seeing those starfish, we got back in the boat and went to our third stop, which is a shallow area that you could actually get out and just kind of wade and float and play in the shallows. Our boat had a little bit bigger prop, and so we actually had to swim just like 50 feet or something to get, into where we could touch. But they helped me shuttle the kids out over there, and then we were just kind of floating, playing in the sand, and they had stingrays there. And the stingrays were actually very friendly, coming up and swimming all around, right around us. My wife stuck our GoPro under the ocean and just got some incredible pictures of the stingrays coming right up to it. And that was really fun. My one son was a little bit freaked out by it. He did kind of if you remember Scooby jumping into Shaggy's arms, he did that a couple times with me because he was a little nervous about the stingrays. But they were friendly, and that was really cool experience. I know there's a few places you can interact with stingrays like that, but this was totally in the wild, unscripted, just happened. And that made it, I think, extra fun. I think they told us we could stay there for like an hour, but we were pretty tired and hungry. And so we probably hung out there for about 20 minutes or so and then headed back to the boat to get refreshments. They had ceviche and some chips and guacamole and salsa and ham and cheese sandwiches and fruit and a number of different things. So it's not like a super heavy lunch, but it was great food. All tasted really good. And then they also had water and, some sodas, and I think they had beer and a couple other things there as well. And so there was definitely food and drink. And at that point, we started heading back to the ship.
That sounds like a great day and like a lovely experience. It actually sounds a lot like my experience in Greece, where we did the catamaran and did the stops and food and snorkel opportunities and just like the small boat experience, as opposed to Steve's pirate boat that he got.
It was an incredible adventure, and we saw things that I have never seen, that sort of sea life. Like, it was definitely an incredible experience. It was a splurge. It was a fairly expensive excursion, but when you realize that, they're having one boat and they have 4 people that they're paying to be with you, 3 crew members and a guide, and driving all the way back there and back, and then food, it kind of makes sense. But definitely glad we did it. It was a little bit intense. A couple of my kids were like, it was a little bit longer than they wanted in the water, but they all did well. But I would, again, you need to be comfortable in the water and snorkeling. It's not a good first snorkel experience, but it's definitely a very unique and cool one.
Awesome. Really good points there. I love the way they did it too. Kind of like the one that we just did on the Wonder. I really appreciated that too, because we had a guide that took us along for about 45 minutes or an hour on our swim. So they gave us a lot of information. And then from there, they kind of took you to two different spots where you could just experience nature on your own and see everything that you could see. I really I appreciated, as someone who likes, nature and everything like that, having them guide us along like they did for you too.
Yeah, it was, and he was giving information the whole time. I was towards the back, kind of keep taking up the rear of my family, so I had a little harder time hearing a lot of it, but he was narrating and giving information to people the whole time, which was great.
So I know we've talked about this before, but I remember going the first time we went on the Fantasy, we went out to the Eastern Caribbean. There was a family of 5, and they did what you did, Bryan, and got their own private boat. And then I was talking to him later on in the cruise, and he's like, well, if you price it out and you take a look at it, sometimes it can be really expensive for, a family of 5 if you're paying individually versus what you get on that boat. If you can afford it and splurge, maybe that it works out price wise to be about the same, or maybe just a little bit more than doing an excursion where you're with the masses. And in this one, you get a little bit more say in what you do sometimes, and a little bit, like you said, Christy, less people on your catamaran versus I think the 50 that was on ours. So a little bit one-on-one service, which might be a little bit better but a little bit better experience, I guess.
Like I said, there was another family of 6, but we didn't interact. Not that we didn't want to interact, but there were 2 different spots on the boat, and it almost felt like a private excursion from that perspective, which was really nice. And like that family at one of the stops, a bunch of them didn't want to get off, and so they didn't have to. Definitely one of the advantage of one of these smaller group excursions, even though you pay a little more for it. This was our big expensive excursion for the cruise, and we really enjoyed it. It was everything I hoped it would be.
Okay, from there, you guys move on to Grand Cayman. Grand Cayman is one of the ports that you have to tender, one of the few ones that Disney actually goes to where you have to tender in. What did you guys have planned there, Bryan?
Yeah, at one point we had an excursion planned, but as we thought about it, and we ended up being really glad we did this, we decided we might be kind of tired after the snorkeling the day before. And so we decided we were going to do Grand Cayman on our own. We looked seriously at going up to the turtle center that they have there. But I ended up deciding not to buy tickets in advance because we really just wanted to wing it and go where the day took us on our Grand Cayman day. We did enough research to know that there's a public bus system there you could take to get around. And of course, they also have taxis. And Grand Cayman is a British colony island. And so, or I guess it's not really technically a colony anymore, but it's part of the British Commonwealth. And it's a fairly safe place to go explore on your own in comparison to some places where you want to be a little more careful. And so we decided to get up. We didn't get into Grand Cayman until like 10:30 was when all the shore time started. And we just went down, got the first tender of the morning, or one of the first tenders of the morning, and went to the port, did a little bit of shopping, looking around there. And then I had looked that the public bus terminal was just across the street and down a little ways, a couple blocks away. And so we decided to walk over there and go check out the beach. What was fun is Grand Cayman, one of the things they're known for is they have really fun traffic police officers who are kind of put on a little bit of a show with their whistle and things. And we sat and watched that for a minute and then crossed the street when he invited us to cross the street. It's a really cool experience. And then did a little bit of shopping, and they have a square that's like their hero square that has some statues and stuff that you can walk through. I wish I had taken some pictures there, but if you're into history, they had a bunch of little plaques and things you could see. And then on the other side of that was the public bus terminal. And so we walked over there. The bus driver was super friendly and helpful. And we said, we want to go to 7 Mile Beach. And he said, yep, I can drop you there. And so we got on the public bus. And then he ended up, I think he was trying to fill up his bus so he could make a little bit more, which is great. But getting some fellow passengers from the MSC ship that was in port. And they were a little bit more diverse group. We had people from Chile and Colombia that got on the bus with us, which was actually really fun to talk to them a little bit. It was a great international experience for my kids, getting to meet people from all over. And we took the bus up to 7 Mile Beach. And the bus was $250 a person. They took US cash. And so it was like $15 for our family of 6. It was a really pleasant experience. And they dropped us off at the public entrance to the beach.
What did you guys have planned there? What did you guys bring with? I guess, does Disney could you grab towels from as you left the ship and everything? What did you guys have planned?
Yeah, so we brought some backpacks to carry some things and stuffed them full of towels as we got off the ship. And then we have some little waterproof things that we can keep our phones and stuff in so that we could get in the water and not worry about it. Being let off at the public beach, it's similar to like if you go to a state beach in the US in California or something like that. We just went down and found a spot on the sand. It was quite busy. There were a lot of people there. I think this beach gets a lot of the local crowd, but it was beautiful water, beautiful sand. They did have restroom facilities. They are kind of the state park variety of restroom facilities. If, and by that I mean, they're not like super pristine clean or anything, but they're functional. And they had, showers for cleaning off the sand. And we just camped out on the beach and played in the water we were probably only there an hour and a half. We didn't stay too long. But it was a really nice area. There were people you could pay to get a chair and an umbrella if you wanted to. We didn't worry about that. They also looked like there were some vendors that maybe were selling drinks and food, but I didn't see any really annoying, sometimes you can go to a beach and there'll be people there trying to get you to buy stuff and being really pressury. I don't know that we had anyone really come up to us and try and push anything on us. They were just there and available if you wanted. So you could make it a full day beach experience if you wanted, or like for us, we were happy to just, play around for an hour or so and then head back to the ship.
And then how was your experience getting the bus back? Like any issues?
So as we walked back, there were a ton of taxis and like tour bus drivers offering to take us back. But we were like, why do we want to pay? Like, we had a great experience with public bus. We're going to take it back. And as we walked, we knew where the bus stop was. We saw the bus come by and we're like, oh, we missed it. We'll have to wait. They actually stopped, turned around, came back and got us. And this was really fun. There was a family in there from Rome, from Italy. And the dad, I think, was helping the bus driver find people and get them into his bus. He's kind of a character. And we had a lot of fun talking with them on the way back. He was trying to, he had a little translation device that didn't do a very good job of Italian and English, but it did great with Spanish. And so he kept trying to use his Spanish, which Grand Cayman is an English-speaking island. But by luck, he kept getting people on the bus who spoke Spanish. We had some locals from Cuba that were working there that came on the bus. And it was kind of a party bus on the way back, just another one of those fun international experiences, that memories you make with your kids. Remember that fun family from Rome that we talked to on the bus in Grand Cayman? And so it was great coming back, no problems.
As you said, Grand Cayman is one of those places where you can, or there's definitely a lot of different places where you can kind of explore on your own, like we did over in Naples Christi, because you've been there before. Mm-hmm. And once you get a little bit more comfortable, stepping out of the Disney bubble and doing things like that, you can really have those experiences like you did. And our experience has generally been whether you use a taxi or sometimes public transportation with the bus, they want to help you. Just ask the questions when you get out there, especially in the Caribbean. And Christy, you had some thoughts about Grand Cayman that we were talking about ahead of time. Did you want to touch on it here?
Yeah, let's talk about it because we're talking about port excursions. I was just in Grand Cayman and I had seen in a Facebook group, and I wish I knew where. I feel like I know the person who said it, but I cannot find it again. Basically, there is this beach in the Caymans. It's like a beach club. It's called Grand Coral or Coral Beach, Grand Cayman. It appears to, if you look at original pictures of it, and even with the ships are being told it's, a part of 7 Mile Beach and long, expansive beach. Well, I don't know when that stopped being a long, expansive beach, but it is not at the moment. I know Disney stops there, and many of the cruise lines are stopping there as your beach break and your access to, so it's public access, but technically on this particular beach, there is no public access because you have to take these steps to get from a retaining wall down to the beach. And it's like maybe 8 feet or 6 feet down. I think I could get see over the top. So maybe it was only, 5 feet on some levels that I could see above. Big retaining wall. It's not that swimmable for kids. Like Blake didn't want to go into the water at all. And I eventually said, well, let's, get Daddy and we'll go with him. And even feeling more secure with Dave, he didn't want to go in there. Dave wasn't comfortable being in there because of the waves breaking right now. There's no sand. Like if your kids like to do sand castles, Blake loves playing in the sand. And there was tons of sand where the chairs were located, but the sand, you couldn't play in it at the water line, so that you could make sandcastles and do things like that. Disney is actually emailing guests that have a stop at this Coral Beach. It's like a Coral Beach Club, I guess, right? This beach club place, and saying, it's not quite what we had in mind. And I actually took a video that I shared with the shore excursion team on Celebrity, and they said, well, that doesn't look anything like they told us it looks like. So they are actually going to be making some contact with the beach club and with figuring out what they're going to do for their guests, because this is the start of their Caribbean season with Celebrity. Doesn't, have a year-round always. Their year-round program's different than Disney's, for example. These cruise lines aren't quite aware of what's going on right now. We always have to remember that post-storms and hurricanes and things of this nature, these Caribbean islands change. And so some of it can't be helped, but also people, you want to be aware. So if your cruise stops at Coral Beach right now, it's a different vibe. Like, it had a lot of music, like rap music, and meant some of the words of the rap music had changed, but it was really loud rap music when I was at the beach all day. It's just not quite what we had in mind when we were going to do our little, Grand Cayman beach experience, because Grand Cayman has some of the most beautiful beaches in the world. And we didn't get that experience, unfortunately.
So looking it up on the map, it's just a little south, 7 Mile Beach there on Grand Cayman is what it looks like. So, but I'm glad you guys had a wonderful experience, Bryan. But to your point too, Christy, one of the things that they always do when you get back is ask you how your experience was, or if they don't, and you had a bad experience or a good experience, you should always stop by the port excursions desk on board the ship, because they love to get that feedback, especially right now where, things are changing, maybe after a hurricane, or maybe it's the first time that the vendor that they used before the pandemic has come back and started up again. All that information helps others in the future, maybe have a little bit better or as great experience as you had.
That's a good point. And I would say if you're wanting a beach day in Grand Cayman right now, again, storms and hurricanes can change things. Don't be afraid I don't know that they have excursions to take you right to 7 Mile to that public beach, but don't be afraid to take a taxi or the public bus. It was easy. It was like a castaway in terms of the water, in terms of being able to float in the water and enjoy it and have the sand and have that whole experience. So I think more
That's
what you were looking
wanted.
For. Yeah. So don't be afraid to go outside of Disney. We felt, it was not a problem. We had no trouble getting there and back. And again, there were tons of cabs. If the public bus isn't your thing, I totally get that. But and the bus, by the way, in Cayman are more like minivans. They're like giant minivans. They're not really a bus, but that's an option. Taxi's an option, but 7 Mile Beach is beautiful.
So from there, you guys are on to Jamaica. I'm really excited to hear about what you did in Jamaica. What did you guys have planned there?
Well, so we could title this episode, What to Do If Your Excursion Gets Canceled Last Minute in Jamaica. So we were supposed to go to Good Hope State, and do zip lining and do the river tubing and the Adventure Falls. And we were all excited for it. And I had noticed we got into to Jamaica at like 7:30 in the morning. So it was a pretty early day, but when we booked, there were a couple different departure times, and we picked one of the later ones thinking, we might be tired at this point in the cruise. Let's do like a 9:15 departure, which ended up being a bit of a mistake for us, because when we went down to meet for our thing, they checked us in for our excursion, and about 5 minutes later, they came in and said, hey, we're really, really sorry. The vendor, the outside tour operator, has canceled this excursion. We're hearing it's because they don't think they can get you back in time due to some road problem. And that ended up being what we heard. There was an issue with the roads. I heard it was protests. I heard it was just road issues. Don't know exactly what, but they felt like we couldn't have the experience we're supposed to have and get back in time. And so our excursion got canceled. And because we were in the last departures, there weren't any other excursions to switch to. So we were kind of out of luck. And at first glance, that would seem really disappointed, and everyone was really disappointed. But this actually ended up being one of my kids' favorite port days. So we could talk about what you can do in Jamaica without having an excursion. And Falmouth is actually a really cool cruise port. As you port, you notice that the whole area around the cruise port looks very kind of colonial British, like something out of Pirates of the Caribbean, like just the architecture. And they've built a really, really nice port complex. And it reminded me a lot of like an outdoor shopping mall sort of thing you might see in California, or we have some here in Utah that are that style. So we decided we'll get off the ship and we'll see what we can do to make the best of it. And as we got off, they have a lot of shopping, a lot of shops. My 12-year-old, who's too smart for his own good, said, hey, Dad, if you're not spending money on the excursion, does that mean we get the money towards our souvenir budget to go buy souvenirs?
Smart.
Yeah. smart. I said, okay, well, maybe we'll extend the souvenir budget. So we had a good time shopping. They found a number of different fun things. And then my youngest wanted to go back and play on the kids club. And so I took him back on the ship real quick. They were doing crew drills, like a major crew drill that day. And so there wasn't a whole lot going on the ship, but the kids club was open. So dropped him off, wished the crew members luck with their drill, and came back out. And my family had made it over. There's a really nice Margaritaville there in Falmouth. And so they have like a whole pool area, and it was really hot. And at that point we were hot and thirsty. And so we decided to sit down in Margaritaville and get everybody some cool drinks. And we tried their nachos. They have like a volcano nacho thing that ended up being kind of fun.
At Margaritaville, did they have a slide?
I think there might have been. I know they had like a little waterfall thing you could go under.
Did your kids go in that?
We didn't end up getting in the pool. Like
Okay.
my kids were kind of like weirded out about the idea of getting in the pool at a restaurant. And I was like,
Yeah.
no, this is what it is.
Uh-huh.
But they didn't end up getting in the water, but we went and looked at it. It looked really nice.
For our
Right.
listeners, if you have babies in swim diapers, you can use this opportunity. You know, this pool is available for use. You can go, you can have a drink, and you can get your kid in a pool because, as you know, people may know, or if you don't know, babies in swim diapers cannot go in swimming pools unless it's like a specified small independent water, which the cruise line will indicate that a baby can go into with swim diapers. It has to do with being able to drain the water. And it's like a regulation for all cruise lines, not just one that they make up. So you could use something like this pool as your little baby water escape. Although I heard that pool is cold. So just something to keep in mind.
So yeah, we did that. We walked around a little bit more. One of the cool things that happened to us when we went into the cabanas that morning, one of the cast members told my wife, they were just being friendly, and she's like, oh, if you're getting off the ship here, you have to try a Jamaican patty. They're these really, really good local food thing. And so my wife had that stuck in her head, and we looked around and they had a little stand, a little fast food type stand where they sell Jamaican patties in the port. And so we're like, we weren't hungry at that point. We're like, ooh, we're going to have to try that. So we walked around a little bit more. I did ask, they had an information desk and they had a sign about trolley city tours. And I asked them about it. I said, oh, we're not doing the trolley tour right now, but there are tour operators you could go do a city tour with. Here's where you go. Family wasn't really interested in that, but that might have been an option if we wanted to. But we just had fun walking around. We went back on the ship for a little bit.
Wait, what's this patty? What's a Jamaican patty?
Well, I'm getting to it.
Okay. I thought, okay.
Yeah. And then we came back off when we were hungry around just after lunch, around lunchtime to go and try these patties. They were really good. They are kind of like, look kind of like a Pop-Tart, but with more of a flaky pastry. And they're filled with, like, we had ours with beef and cheese. They had some different fillings you could get with them, but the dough is actually seasoned and it was really, really good. Yeah, we were really grateful for a chance to try those. Something unique and definitely worth trying. Our head server was from Jamaica, and I asked him about him that night, and he's like, yeah, that's a very typical food that like people working in an office might go grab at lunchtime, kind of their fast food. And we may not have had an opportunity to get those if we had done our excursion. So that was really fun. They also had Dr. Pepper there, which you don't get that on the Disney cruise ship. And I love Dr. Pepper. And I was like, I can get one of those in Jamaica. This is really cool. We also found a craft market while we were out there that had like handmade like crafts and stuff like that, artesian type market, rather than just like the more typical souvenir shops that we had shopped in. And so went through that craft market and found a couple cool little things for Christmas gifts for people. And yeah, we just had a fun day exploring the port. It is a big port area with a lot of shopping. I think there may have been another restaurant in there. And then they had the Margaritaville and this little patty stand. They had live music playing. So they had a couple of bands out playing music that day. And we just made the best of it. And it ended up being my oldest daughter. She said she thought, aside from Castaway, it was her favorite port day. So there you go. Sometimes I really would like to go back and do that excursion, but sometimes life throws you curveballs, and Disney wants to make sure you have a good experience and get back to the ship. We did get fully refunded for those excursions. The moral of the story, the earlier departure did go, but I think they got stuck in traffic for a while, but they still had enough time that I think the tour operators felt they could have a good experience. So that also kind of taught me sometimes you might be better off getting the earlier departure just in case something goes wrong and the later one doesn't go. So that was our Jamaica experience. Definitely think Falmouth is a port you don't have to have an excursion on. So if you're going there, you can have a great day without it. And if you're going to have one, maybe try and get an earlier departure time.
Good tips.
Sometimes less is more. And I love those tips too, because we had an excursion booked and we actually just backed out of it. And we're just going to spend the day in port like you did on our upcoming sailing, Bryan. So I'm glad to hear that. Sometimes it's fun to just, take the day, a little bit more leisurely, explore and just see what you find. And you found some patties, some great music, and a nice cold drink at Margaritaville. So I love that.
Yeah.
Nachos
Too. Yeah. Well, let's just touch on Castaway quick. What did you guys have planned there, and any thoughts about Castaway, Bryan?
Yeah, so this is our third time in Castaway. We love Castaway. I did do the 5K in the morning. That's something I have to do. But we decided this time, usually we've done snorkeling there, and we decided we weren't going to snorkel. We were just going to hang out on the beach this time, which was really nice to do that. Not if you've never snorkeled at Castaway, it is kind of fun to do it once, but it is a lot of swimming and it takes up a big chunk of your day. We had a lot of fun just hanging out on the sand. I went and did the water slides on Castaway more than I usually do, the Pelican Plunge. They are kind of unique to have a water slide that drops you in the ocean like that. I don't know where else you can do that, but that was a lot of fun. We ate lunch at Cookies too, because that's where our serving team was. I haven't walked down to that part of Castaway as much before. We usually hang out right around that family beach, right by the snorkel area. And so that was kind of fun to walk down there. Lunch was good. Enjoyed that. Yeah, it was just a great day. We stayed on Castaway almost till the end of the day. Just really enjoyed it. It was perfect weather. We also checked out, I think our earlier sailings, they weren't fully back up and operational, but some of the little bohemian shops were back up and running. If you wanted to find something that was less Disney and more local, we try and collect something local. We have a set of travel shelves now in our family room and try and find something representative of each place we stop. And so it's kind of fun.
What'd you buy?
So in Castaway, we got this little like turtle piggy bank that says Bahamas on it. So that's kind of, our cruise piggy bank. But we found other cool stuff in Jamaica. We found a really cool, we got two things there. We got a Jamaican nativity thing, but then we also got just a statue of a native woman carrying a basket that was kind of cool. Grand Cayman, we got a pirate skull. Cayman Islands have skulls, a lot of pirate themed stuff. And so we found cool things in each port stop. It was kind of fun to have we collected ornaments for a while, but it was fun to have something new to find. There's some cool things out there. And then every time I look at that shelf in the family room, I can imagine I'm back on a cruise.
I love the skull, Chrissy. I think that would look perfect in your living room there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm going to hurry up and get me two.
No, but that's a great idea, Bryan. Having that, to look back on memories. We've got a shelf like that in our room too, where I've got a piece of coral when I went out to a place out in the Indian Ocean when I was in the Air Force. And it's kind of cool to look back on that because it reminds me of like Castaway, the movie, like being out there where Tom Hanks was and just out in the middle of nowhere. So it's cool to have those things, whether it's on your Christmas tree, to bring back the memories. Well, I guess as we finish up, I'm glad you guys had just a wonderful time on the Fantasy. Thanks for sharing all these different experiences that you had in the ports with you and your family, Bryan. Before we finish up, though, what kind of tips would you have for people, after being on forest sailing, just getting ready to go on your fifth year? What kind of advice would you give people thinking about taking port adventures and doing them with your families and maybe sailing on the Fantasy? Whatever you got.
Yeah, so I think definitely make planning your port adventures part of fun leading up to the cruise. Like, you can involve your kids and family. You can go do a little research and teach them. We did talk about some of the places we were going and gave them a little bit of opportunity to learn about that. Actually was the admin of our Facebook group for this sailing, and I ended up putting together a fun quiz, a pirate quiz about pirate themes from each of the different ports we went to, because I did a little bit of research and was kind of curious about that. And that was a fun thing to do and share it with the group. There's a lot of pirate lore in the Caribbean, as you might imagine, but definitely use an opportunity to learn. Be aware, I think be aware of your family and whether you really want to go with a big excursion at every port. I think doing that multiple days in a row can get exhausting. Also, we've gotten comfortable enough now, we're willing to go outside and do something on our own. There are places that are more conducive to that than others, but don't be afraid to get off the ship and just make it a port day. Don't feel like you have to spend a bunch of money on an excursion, or decide to go spend the money on a really cool excursion one day and then, save your budget and just get off the ship in the others. I think those are the big things. And then don't be afraid to go on an adventure.
I love it. Christy, any final thoughts about the Western Caribbean or port adventures in general?
I love the Western Caribbean. And so, no, I think it's a great place to experience water activities, I guess is my tip and advice, because it really is known for their gorgeous ports diving, if you're a diver, or snorkeling, definitely consider experiencing something like that there.
I did hear from fellow cruisers that they loved snorkeling in Grand Cayman. I think if we go there again, I want to try that. We didn't this time because we'd done it in Cozumel, but I'd love to try Grand Cayman. And definitely beautiful beaches and water. And it's just really fun to sail past the islands. Like we sailed around Cuba, and that was really fun to see. I kind of got the impression that Western Caribbean wasn't as full as the Eastern Caribbean. And I don't know where I got that impression, but it's not the case. We had just such a fun time.
There is kind of a feeling about that, isn't there? I don't know why that is either, because we did the Eastern the first time too, kind of for that. Well, we'll do the Western at some point, but I'm super excited to do the Western and stop at the ports that you guys stopped at.
Is this your first time doing a Western Caribbean cruise?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that'll be exciting.
I know. I'm super excited about it. Okay, Bryan. Well, thank you so much for taking your time this morning to talk about your port exchanges. We really appreciate it. We appreciate all that you've done for our show, being a supporter for so long and being part of active member in our Patreon group, always giving out lots of good tips for people as they're traveling. I know that you've got the Wish still on your bucket list, and a whole new year, 2023 is just about upon us. What's next for you and your family, if you want to talk about it?
We should get on the Wish at some point, but it's actually not on our immediate radar because we don't want to do a 3 or 4 night sailing anytime soon, especially flying to Florida. Airfare has gotten kind of crazy, so we're going to be enjoying the best coast, the West Coast for a little bit. Got to rip Christy a little bit about that. The East Coast does have better itineraries, though. But we are.
Yes, it does.
I couldn't pass up the Magic coming to San Diego, so we are booked on the Magic for next fall break. Actually, we leave the same day, I think, exact of our 7-night cruise. We're leaving next fall on a Baja. Well, it goes to actually Catalina Island and Ensenada. So we're on the Magic out of San Diego next fall. So we're super excited to get back on the Magic and enjoy the Aqua Dunk. Yeah, go see some new things. Really interested to see, because I think there's a lot of rumor the Magic's going through a dry dock in this spring. There's a gap in the schedule, and I'll be interested to see if they do anything cool during that or not. But that's all speculation.
Promenade Lounge could probably be rethemed, and she does need a little bit of tender loving care. I think she's probably the one that's maybe shown her age a little bit more, but she was the first ship 1998 that came out. So I'm excited she's coming to the West Coast too, Bryan. We've got a couple cruises booked on her next fall as well. I'm sorry that we're not going to be on the same one, but I'm excited to hear your thoughts, especially going over to Catalina Island. I've never been there. I've always wanted to go.
Yeah, super excited to try that out. That'll be fun. So we'll have to come back and report, and who knows what else we may be up to between now and then, but or after then. Definitely cruising's definitely not done for us. Definitely plan to get out again. All
right. Well, as we finish up, Christy, any final thoughts?
No.
Okay.
I have nothing.
Nothing.
We have a cruise in like weeks.
You got to unpack so you can get ready to pack.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. Well, as we get out of here, Bryan, once again, thanks again for coming on and sharing your experiences. And I want to wish from all of us here at the DCL Podcast all the best to your family over the holiday season. Just enjoy the time with family and friends. And we look forward to talking to you when you get back off your next sailing. Thanks again, Bryan.
Thank you.
Cheers. Well, once again, I'd really like to thank Bryan for coming on and sharing his and his family's experiences as they sailed on the beautiful Disney Fantasy around the Western Caribbean this past year. We always look forward to where he and his family are going to be traveling in the future. Can't wait for them to get back off the Magic and eventually spend time on the Wish as well. Well, we'd also like to give a huge shout out to our Patreon supporters who help bringing you this show each and every week ad-free. If you'd like to find out more how you can support our show through the Patreon program, you go to patreon.com/DCL podcast and find out all the information there. Well, if you've been enjoying this show and you know others who would enjoy it as well, we sure would appreciate it if you pass it along. That helps us get a little bit better known in the Disney cruising, and just the Disney podcasting community in general. And if for those of you who've taken time to go over to iTunes and leave us a review, we appreciate that as well. That's how other people find this show. It helps us to continue to build our audience. Thank you, each and every one of you who've taken time to do that. Well, if you are headed out on a Disney cruise, headed out on Adventures by Disney, headed down to the parks, or just getting ready for the springtime Run Surprise program through Run Disney, on behalf of myself, Steve, Christy, and Chris, all of us here at the DCL Podcast, we want to wish you to be well, enjoy the time with family and friends, and we'll see you next time on the DCL Podcast.
The DCL Podcast is not affiliated with the Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney Company, Adventures by Disney, or Run Disney. All of the opinions expressed on our shows are those of the hosts and the guests who appear on the show. If you have any questions about any of these products, please contact the Walt Disney Company.